Hello and welcome to The Pledge. Now, the shortlists for the Oscars were announced this week, with one British title bagging an impressive 7 nominations. It features dark rooms where small groups of people gather to discuss vital issues facing the country under the watchful eye of an elder statesman who has somehow risen to the top. But it turns out Darkest Hour isn't about Greg Dyke and an episode of The Pledge, some fella called Winston Churchill. Whatever. Now, this week, June takes on the world's billionaires. Greg argues more money isn't needed for defence. Michelle thinks people need to learn to be offended. And Majid says Britain needs a party like UKIP. But first, it's me. Now, roll up, and hear all about the latest victim of the all-powerful, unblinking thought police. I speak of Conservative MP Ben Bradley, who's found himself being likened to a Nazi or a professor of eugenics for comments made 6 years ago at the height of the row over the benefits cap. Now, admittedly, the way he put his point over was clumsy, but at the heart of what he says lies a glaring, undeniable truth. Amid other comments, Bradley said, quotes, "How many children you have is a choice. If you can't afford them, stop having them. Vasectomies are free." Close quotes. He's not, as the drearily predictable ensuing witch hunt claimed, ordering unemployed people not to have children. Rather, they should be able to afford them. Now, allowing for the fact that in reality most of us remain blissfully unaware if we're about to lose our jobs, surely when it comes to long-term unemployed, this is as simple as kid stuff.
OK, so, Nick,
True.
In Ghana, we have a word, and the word is kwasiasem. And
Genius. You're right. Well done.
Kwasiasem, and the translation, I can't even think of the right English translation, but the closest thing would be nonsense.
Right, OK.
Absolute nonsense. I think what you're saying is actually quite dangerous.
Tell me why.
Because it is bordering on eugenics. So basically what you're saying is that only people with money should have the choice to have as many kids as they want.
No.
Well, what else are you saying?
You can have as many children as you want. Right. But don't expect the state to pay for them.
No,
I'm not saying don't have children. You must have some degree of fiscal responsibility yourself. I'm not having... If long-term unemployed people want to have 15 children, as long as they find a way to pay for them, fine.
But that's not what Ben Bradley was saying.
It is really...
I don't think so.
He doesn't say long-term. That's where he went wrong.
I don't think so.
I allow for the fact that I don't know if I'm going to lose my job tomorrow. Well, I won't have children, but I allow for that.
But don't you think, Nick, rather what we should be looking at, the issue shouldn't be about how many children people are having. The issue should be how do we help people, how do we help the long-term unemployed get into work?
Respectfully, that's a separate conversation.
It's not, because actually, if we're tackling that problem, then we wouldn't even be having your conversation.
Yeah, OK.
At all.
You were shaking your head and tut-tutting, as were you, Majid.
In Urdu, Nick, we have a word called bakwas. Which basically means nonsense.
Cobblers, yeah.
Nonsense.
Right, okay.
Now, before I tell you what I think...
Majid. Kwasiasem.
Bakwas.
Exactly.
Shall I give you the English word?
Yeah.
Nonsense.
I'm going to give you the whole words when you're done.
Oh, yeah. I want the next in line.
I'm going to tell you what I think. I think let's just... Ben Bradley has... apparently attempted to issue what I would only call a non-apology, that I think others are calling an apology. So let's check out what he said.
The broad issue that I was trying to address was that there are a lot of people, particularly in places like Mansfield, who work very hard and have to make very difficult decisions financially about whether they can afford to have kids. I found that people find it frustrating when a very small minority of people appear to take advantage of the benefit system. And now we have the benefits cap, and we have a 2-child limit on child benefit, and hopefully those things can't happen anymore. But language aside, that was the broad point I was trying to make, and I still stand by that.
So, language aside, I just happened to call for the vasectomy of poor people, and I called them unemployed wasters. Language aside...
I don't recall unemployed wasters.
Yes, unemployed wasters. If only he had spoken in such measured terms to begin with, we could have had a reasonable conversation about people taking personal and individual responsibility, which I agree with. However, he didn't say that. No. He called for people to be vasectomized and called them wasters. And actually, I think if you carefully look to that video, the word sorry wasn't mentioned once.
Right.
Did you hear the word sorry?
No.
But he didn't. He said vasectomies are free. He didn't say that people should. He pointed out the availability of it. He didn't say
What's
they
the
should
implication?
be. I grant you that. I grant you that. But hold on a second. You say just lastly. You say you believe in fiscal responsibility.
Yeah.
Maggie, if you can't afford to raise a family. Why should you have the children?
Well, so I believe in fiscal responsibility, and currently the benefit system.
You support the heart
what
of
he
what
just said there in that video is a reasonable response to reforming the welfare system that we have. And in his response, he said that there is a cap on 2 children.
Yes, there is.
I have no problem with that. I wasn't involved in the debate that led to it, but now learning that, I have no problem with the fact that it's capped at 2. And if you want more than 2. Then work out.
So, as I said, his language is clumsy.
Clumsy is an understatement.
OK, his language is offensive.
Well, then you
but the heart of what he says, you agree with.
Well,
no.
The responsibility.
You should.
Can we hear the whole version?
Yeah, give us the whole language.
Yeah, in whole, we have 2 words.
Oh, yeah.
Spot on. Very simple. So, absolutely. The words that...
Not the 2 words I was expecting, by the way.
Do you have a Ghanaian for that?
we have a lot of words as well. I'll tell you some of them in the break. But the 2 words I would apply to your thing is spot on. The words that Ben used were poor, they were not professional, but this is a young guy writing online 5 years ago. Yeah. The reason that you're saying his apology is a non-apology and all the rest of it is because he's been bullied he's been bullied into making this statement, and I'm coming on to this in my topic because I feel strongly about this happening to people. He's been cajoled into making this statement for something that actually he agrees with. His point is very valid, and I'm one of 6 children, so I am all in favour of if you want loads of kids, my friend, you go and have loads of kids.
Yes.
But what I am not in favour of is when you don't exercise respect for other people, personal responsibility, and you expect, actually, to have all of your children and expect other people to pay for them. I find that disrespectful.
Do you think he should have said sorry for the word unemployed wasters and for implying they have a vasectomy? Do you think that deserved an apology?
I think he should have had some balls to stand up and say what he thinks, which is my point is valid, but the words were wrong, and for the choice of words, I apologise for those words.
So he didn't say that.
Let's find out what the word is in the trendy eateries of West London.
But surely what we decided as a society many years ago is that we would help fund children.
Right.
It's not about the family, it's about the child. It's making sure that there is some money going into that household to protect and help that child.
We do that, Greg.
Who didn't choose to be born.
They're going to help 2 children there. We're doing
yes, no, I've no problem with putting a cap
rose tinted, though. You think all the money goes to the kids?
I think in many cases, yes. I think yours is the. I mean, you know, every so doing the show with you, I suddenly think you gradually get more liberal, and then you revert.
Then you come with this.
Revert back to being the son again. You know? I mean, this story has been in this story or stories like it has dominated things like the Sun and the popular press for years. Scroungers. Yeah. Actually, I've no doubt there are a few people who might make a decision to have children because they think it would get them more money. I don't think that's in any way the majority.
No
which in that statement...
And therefore, it seems to me to make the blanket suggestion he's made that everyone who's unemployed should get a vasectomy, which is really what he's saying.
Which is wrong. And keep saying long-term.
And the point is, if that's what you think, Nick, then I don't think you should have used his argument anywhere near your conversation, because actually what you've done is conflated the 2. You should have just made your debate today purely about what you think and not brought his rude and offensive statements anywhere near your argument.
But that's the conversational point, and that's why he's hooked into it.
No, but that's not why, because what he's saying is that he actually thinks that what Ben is trying to say is one thing, and what I'm saying is clearly Ben's words are not that.
No.
So Nick should say what you believe.
So do you agree with me with long-term unemployed? Then
No.
So you can have as many children as you like and expect the state to won you over a little bit.
I already thought that.
All right, OK. No,
there are a small minority of people who appear to take advantage of the benefit system. If only he'd spoken in those measured
terms in the first place.
That wasn't what he said.
And that's why I'm saying
agree with that.
No, but then you would have to say, OK, are we going to change the whole system because of that small minority? Or do we accept that in the end you bound in any system where you give handouts, someone is going to abuse it.
Exactly.
But you've got to look and say, well, are the majority not abusing it?
And you act as if benefits is this unlimited amount of money.
No, it was when he wrote that.
Very difficult.
Yes, because of Ian Duncan Smith's excellent work.
Michelle. I am very proud that we have a society that has a welfare state that acts as a safety net for people that cannot, for whatever reason, they've got disabilities or they're poorly. Yeah. So I'm very proud that we've got that welfare state. What we do have and what we shouldn't have, and this is what he was getting to, we should never have a situation where you can choose to be on benefits as a lifestyle choice. So the benefit society should help you in your times of need. It should never be a lifestyle choice. And that's where I have a problem.
I agree with that, and I think what we need is better mechanisms. No. What we need is better mechanisms to actually help train the long-term.
Duncan Smith put it right. It's a hand up, not a hand out.
Yeah. But Nick, what would you have done to the family with 6 children and both mother and father suddenly made redundant and unemployed?
Well, I did say long-term unemployed, because I know unemployment...
They could well levy... I mean, there are places in this country where you are going to be a long-term unemployed if you lose your job.
It's worth saying this week we learnt that employment is at a 40-year high, which is great news. I mean, we probably couldn't even get higher employment than this, really.
No, I think that's right. I think you almost got full employment. Anyway, it's time we moved on. And,
yes, thank you.
And forgot that maybe Nick can go back to being a Liberal. If President Putin decided to go to war with Britain, we'd most likely lose. That's according to the head of the British Army, General Sir Nick Carter. As a result, General Carter is demanding we spend more money on defence. But is an all-out war between just Britain and Russia in any way likely? No, of course not. Being part of NATO means it couldn't happen. If we were attacked by Russia, all our NATO partners are committed to support us. So Russia wouldn't take the risk. Why would we want to spend more public money on our conventional army when we're already the 5th highest spender on armaments in the world, and at a time when vital public services like our struggling NHS need more cash? If there is a threat from Russia, it is more likely to be a range of cyber attacks, and I agree with General Carter that threat might require greater investment, but our conventional army does not need more cash.
Well, call me crazy, but when it comes to running an army, I'm probably going to listen more to a general than I am to you, Greg Dyke, for various reasons. But if I was to say to you that in the last few years, if I'd told you many years ago, the last few years, Russia would effectively invade Ukraine, they'd shoot an airliner out of the sky. In Britain, we'd have to deploy troops because a terrorist had decided to blow up a concert hall in Manchester where little girls were listening to a band. You think, my God, what sort of world are we in there? And with those sort of constant threats, the idea, and it all has to be rationalised as to how much extra money. But if you've got a general, because what annoys me is that normally it's when they retire that they say the army is on the verge of collapsing, the Navy hasn't got enough ships, it's terrible retreat. And it takes a brave general while you're in post as he is. If he's saying, I think we should listen, I'm not automatically signing the chequebook, but he must have a valid argument.
But you see... Well,
the world is a changing place,
To be fair to him, let's have a look at what he said.
OK.
The main impact has been to convince ordinary Russians that the West is a threat. We've been made to appear as the enemy, whether we like it or not, and whatever the real situation. Moreover, we, on our side, don't have the same level of understanding.
I mean, everybody who's head of the Defence Forces, like anyone who's head of the NHS, like anyone who's head of our school systems, they all say we need more money. Now, you're the one who says week after week we can't increase taxation. Well, if we're not going to increase taxation, if there is any more money available, it's not a lot, and at the moment you'd spend it on the health service. You wouldn't spend on
well, the first priority is defence of the nation, defence of the... I would suggest it's a changing world,
Yes,
Greg.
but I'm saying that it's not under threat. I mean, if we are under threat from cyber attack and the rest of it, would you give it to the army to spend? No.
No.
Sorry, no, carry on.
I just think I'm in the middle here between you two, and I think I am literally...
Yes, you are. Right. They worked it out.
I agree with you. We wouldn't have predicted Russia's aggressive stances in the Crimea, in Syria and what it's doing there, and increasingly, extending its foreign policy across the world, backing Iran, for example, and the mischief Iran's been up to in the Middle East. We wouldn't have predicted all of that. Of course, don't forget, Greg, we did have an agreement with the Ukraine that if the Crimea was annexed by the Russians, we'd jump to their defence, and we didn't honour that agreement. So, you know, people, I think it's understandable that they may suspect whether the NATO powers are up to the job, especially with Turkey and some of its machinations these days inside Syria. Would we leap to Turkey's defence if Erdogan the nutter decided to do something to the Kurds and it was wrong? So there are genuine questions, but at the same time I agree with you. I think that we've got to be smart about it. I think the threat today isn't, and it's highly unlikely that Russia would invade Britain. Yeah. There would be no land invasion. I think the threat is cyber. I think it is online. I think it's things like hacking and what have you, and leaking information and spies, and even perhaps taking out certain operatives through poison and assassination, as the Russians did on British soil with Litvinenko. Yeah. So I think we need to be smart about how we spend the money. So not necessarily buying more tanks, but looking at cyber, which may not be the army, but also looking at drones for intelligence gathering, not for bombing people.
Real quick intervention, just so that the viewers get an idea. Let's just take a look at some of the spending and some of the numbers of troops we're talking about. I'll just pick one number out from the top. The GDP on defence, for instance. Russia, 5.3%. UK, I would argue, just 2%. That gives you an idea, and there's some troop numbers there as well.
But isn't that our requirement? The requirement under NATO is 2%.
Yes.
And we're spending that.
Yes.
I mean, good point. The only point that worried me about the whole thing was, I mean, when you do get a President Trump who gets elected, you know, really criticising NATO and saying it wasn't necessary. Now, I suspected, because he didn't know what NATO was, he very rapidly changed his position. He very rapidly changed his position.
And just to add to that, well, number one, the Russian economy isn't as large as ours, so if they're spending 5%, we're spending 2%, I bet you we're still spending more than they are. But the other part is this, I think what Russia has shown us is, in terms of how they plan on attacking the West, it is through cyber. If you look at what they did with the US elections, I don't see why they wouldn't do that here. There's possibility that they were involved in Brexit. So who knows? So for me, I think the focus should be on spending on cyber, for sure. They've proven that's what they're going to do.
Well, I'm personally in shock, because this is the first episode of The Pledge I've done with you where you are not calling for us to pay more tax. That's my first point.
I'll be doing that later.
Slightly confused, but now, putting that aside, I agree with you, because I think in terms of military might, when you look at the numbers of NATO combined versus Russia, NATO way outdoes Russia in terms of tanks, military personnel and everything. So I don't think we need to boost that side of it. But to your point, I think you're absolutely right that we need to be thinking about how are we going to combat the cyber, the propaganda, the fake news, the influencing of elections, apparently, and all that kind of thing. And we can only do that with training and investment in our cyber security forces. You're right.
And, of course, we are planning to spend $31 billion, I think it is, on Trident. Which I think a lot of people in the armed forces are not certain is the right way to spend your money, and that would release a lot of money to spend on. But I still wouldn't spend it on.
But would you get rid of Trident?
No, I would spend it on cyber. Would I get rid of Trident? It's a very difficult. I was very interested watching the interview with Tony Blair recently, who said when he was Prime Minister, they looked quite carefully at saying, do we really want Trident? Now, Blair was not a hard-line lefty by anybody's standards, you know. So, and then what he was saying was we could have just come under the American umbrella under Trident, and therefore we would have saved this sort of money. And I think that's an interesting discussion to have.
Yeah.
So that means
what cost does that come?
I'm not certain.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. Often lefties in the UK are very critical of America, and yet when it comes to Trident, are happy for us to be beholden to American influence. And I think we've got to be careful here, because
you're confusing Tony Blair.
Hold on. Well, no, I'm talking about the narrative that is shifted. So I think we've got to be very careful here that what does America under Trump demand from us? If we cut down on our 2% commitment, and cutting Trident would significantly cut that because it's quite expensive, what would Trump demand of us, apart from the posturing? He'd be quite angry. But what would he demand of us? And how would he try and humiliate us by saying, oh, Britain has become one of our satellite nations, reliant on us for its defence? I think we've got to be...
I think if we decide all policy based on Trump, we're in real trouble.
If we're saying, whether you're I'm saying whether you're a Brexiteer who wants Britain to carve its own way out in the world, or you're a left-winger who doesn't want us to be under the domain of Trump's influence in America, my point is, whatever your narrative is, it doesn't make sense either way then, does it, surely? Surely we have to maintain our independence, whether you're a Brexiteer or
Well, there seem to be an awful lot of countries around the world who don't have their equivalent of Trident, who are independent. That's what I'm saying. But I'm not...
This is Great Britain.
Yeah, that's the problem. That's the problem. This is the old imperial power. We ruled the world and we can still rule the world. That I think, is the wrong attitude. I'm not certain about Trident. I really am not.
Coming back to your point, June, though, about the spending as regards the military personnel, and Michelle is absolutely right to bring in NATO. I say just challenge the same I think said to Greg. The world moves at a dizzying pace, you know.
Okay.
We just have no idea what might be waiting around the corner.
Precisely, that's why I'm saying let's spend the money on technology. Let's spend the money where the world is moving. The world is moving based on technology.
That's a very accurate point. The way they acted in Crimea or Ukraine, they could be doing that again, and we just got people looking at computers.
No, but there's no way they would come and do that here.
No.
They're far too sophisticated
but NATO was completely
to
new to
operate
it,
in that way.
I mean, the Russians must be laughing all the way to the Kremlin.
That is not how the Russians would attack the West.
I suspect Erdogan's
they do
going to
that
ruin
in
NATO
Crimea,
for us,
not
by the
here.
way. Erdogan's behaviour, because of what he's doing in Syria against the Kurds, I think that NATO was never meant to be an offensive pact. It was a defensive pact. Erdogan's on the offensive, and if he comes under attack now because of his movements in Syria, do we have to leap to his defence? It's dangerous.
Dangerous. And speaking of dangerous, I have had enough. I've had enough of being told what to think, enough of people being bullied and threatened and shut down. I've had enough of tiptoeing around the permanently offended brigade. And almost every day is seeing yet another example of people being forced to retract something and issue an apology because the social justice warriors have demanded that they do so. Whether it's a school closing down its decade-long farming project because a vegan didn't like it, tube workers removing factually historical references because some people felt offended, or brands apologising for advertising in certain publications just because some people don't like it. People are now terrified of causing offence and are being made social pariahs. The permanently offended brigade are not only trying to erase history, they are trying to erase any difference of opinion at all. We are on a slippery slope, and trust me, we need to hit the brakes as a matter of urgency.
Right, so the pig farming school. Let's see. There was a petition set up by a vegan parent.
I'm furious about this example, by the way.
So you're outraged.
Oh, I am.
So there's a vegan parent who was outraged, like Michelle's outraged at him, that the school was rearing pigs and was then going to
pigs for the slaughter.
Send the pigs to slaughter and feed the pigs to the kids. So let's just see what the petition said first before we go on. In 2018, we should be teaching children compassion towards animals. The school has made students and parents uncomfortable by discriminating against their beliefs by condemning these pigs to death. I think it should have also mentioned and then feeding them to the kids.
Yeah.
That's an important piece of information. And then let's see what the school has responded with.
Oh, I've got steam coming out my ears, honestly.
The school has said we respect the vegan philosophy, but Priestland School is proud to serve the whole community. We shouldn't be laughing here, guys, but it's, you know, we want to educate our students about where their food comes from, and to do this in a sustainable way. Our preferred outcome for this year's cohort of pigs to enter the food chain as planned for us then to sit down and have a rational discussion about whether or not we continue to have pigs in the future. I mean, look, OK, so by the way, I'm a very loud and vocal critic of the left and how they try and witch hunt people out of positions, out of saying things they feel that they disagree with. I agree with you on all of that. I just want to be careful in one aspect, and that's it works both ways. It's a sword that cuts both ways. When L'Oreal featured a hijabi in its advert, and I criticised it because I don't agree with the hijab in principle, but a lot of the right wing were offended, and they complained, and they were outraged, and now the hijabi has been removed from the L'Oreal campaign because she said some statements against Israel.
Yeah.
So the outrage is happening on both sides of the debate, and I think everyone just needs to calm down a bit, really.
But coming back to that pig story, this was pigs learned from a farm.
Yes.
So the pigs were always going to be in the food chain.
Yeah, but the kids didn't have to eat them.
Yeah.
Yeah, but what they're trying to do...
You're right, they didn't. They had a choice.
Yeah.
They weren't going to be forced to eat the sausage.
Well, were they going to be told, this is the pig
this is
last week?
Yeah, guys, come on.
You can't do that.
Yeah.
This is in a rural community.
Hold on, let me tell you a story, because my dad's from a rural community.
Hold on. I think we've heard enough from you. If you just for a moment.
I'm going to tell you a story about rabbits.
One moment, please. This is a rural community where very likely their granddads or their dads are possibly farmers. They raise the chickens, they take the eggs, and then they eat the chickens.
I love that.
It is the circle of life. And don't worry, I won't start singing. And it is utterly absurd. And coming back to Michelle's central point, just this week.
So you're offended?
Offended by what?
at the fact that this
is too strong a word. I just think they're wrong.
Yeah.
I just think they're wrong.
That's great.
Is too
That's
strong.
great. But Michelle's outraged, isn't it?
But hold on,
curious about it.
But this week, so that was, I think, last week or early part of this week. The week started with the Churchill Cafe, or Churchill, a picture of Churchill. We learnt being adored with something like imperialistic scum or whatever it might have been.
Yeah, that's right.
Then we progressed later this week. The film Zulu. They happened to write on Dollis Hill Tube Station.
I was offended by that.
What?
I was completely offended by that.
We
should not be celebrating colonialism.
No,
I'm not saying it didn't.
Was that the Michael
Heroism?
They weren't celebrating anything. They were
way.
just pointing out that on that day, this is what happened.
No, they were celebrating it.
They
were saying how many
British,
Victorian bosses
for viewers
that
who
they
don't,
defeated.
Very, very briefly, in the London Underground, many places they put a thought for the day, effectively, which is written up.
Which is meant to be an inspirational thought for a day. I don't know how that's inspirational.
Hang on, let me just explain. And for those who don't know, last week it was the anniversary. And we're seeing it now. It was the anniversary of the Battle of Rorke's Drift, which is immortalised in the film with Sir Michael Caine, Zulu. And I think my numbers are right a bit.
Title in itself, anyway.
Well, guess what? It's history. 150 British troops held out against 4,000 Zulus. It was an act of heroism, not colonialism. That's what they're celebrating.
Well, why were they there? They were in the country as an act of colonialism.
We can conduct.
So I'm sorry. Yes, it happened. Of course it happened. But that's not something we need to be celebrating. I'm not saying don't talk about it. I'm not saying erase it from history. Of course not. But we also have to be honest about our history. Not all of our history needs to be celebrated.
Can I tell a story about eating meat? So I had rabbits when I was a kid, right? And my dad...
Is this going to be a good story?
You've got like a hunting jacket on it. It's a bit like a ratting jacket.
Well, then listen to this story. So my dad, we had six rabbits, and what you're saying about rural... So my dad's like this, right? We had these 6 rabbits, and one day we're at home, and I must have been about 7 years old, and we're eating some form of meat. And I asked my mum, this is delicious, what is it? And my dad said, it's the rabbits that you were rearing.
It's bugs.
Now, what I'm going to say is... I was traumatised, and so I've got no... I'm not a vegan.
You have survived, though.
I'm not even vegetarian. Wait, let me finish the story. I'm not vegan, and I'm not even vegetarian, and I've got no problem with this school rearing pigs and then sending them off to the slaughter. I just think it's a bit nasty that the kids that were stroking these pigs are then asked whether they want to eat them.
I think that's wrong.
So don't eat them. Don't eat them.
I don't think that's fair. But, I mean, there isn't.
The school was getting.
For once, I agree.
The school was getting death threats.
No.
That's obviously crazy.
One
of the changes of recent years is that the vegan movement...
No, go back. What was the sentence you were going to say?
I agree with you. Because, well, just because you agree with me.
He's strong with that, didn't he?
No, but because... I mean, I've got to the stage where if you invite people for lunch and somebody says I'm a vegan, I take the invitation away because it's so difficult to feed. But also, I have no objection to people saying I'm a vegan. I just object to them trying to impose it upon the rest of us.
But so this guy is, but vegans aren't generally, Greg. I mean, let's not be irresponsible.
No, some aren't. Some do.
Yeah, no, but they do. They're angry. So I've had a debate about this actually. I'm not vegetarian, let alone vegan, but I do think the direction of travel is in a kinder future for meat. And I think, for example, the future will be things like biologically grown laboratory meat, where you don't slaughter animals.
Sure, but
that's how we're going to move away from it. But
if you want
it is a
move
cruel
away,
industry, isn't it? It is a very it's a very cruel industry, isn't it?
What?
The meat industry.
It's a very what?
Cruel industry.
Yeah, the practice is
the practice of the meat industry.
I think we're going off topic. My point is this: if I make it about this vegan guy, listen,
because this is just one thing.
This guy did something wrong.
Yeah, so to that vegan, that guy, listen, if you don't like that, take your kids to a different school. End of story. Move your kid on. And what I'm getting so... Because it can't be that difficult.
Another school might be doing the same thing.
So he has to raise...
Well, an easier solution, if you don't like it, don't eat the pork.
No, but what I'm saying
that's an easier solution. His kids didn't have to eat the pigs, did he?
But I am sick to the back teeth of being told what is acceptable and what is not acceptable based on what people think and don't think.
But you are telling this parent what's acceptable.
But you don't have to
do it. But you're doing the same to the parent.
No, I'm telling the parent, if you want to be a vegan, my friend, be a vegan. I respect your choice. The second you start dictating what other people can do because of your belief system, I've got a problem. I've got a serious problem. And that's what I'm offended by. I don't care what people think. You can have your opinion, it can be different, but I don't care.
To be a devil's advocate,
what I do care, though, about Majid, is where people are ramming their opinions into everyone else. People are tiptoeing around, afraid to say what
I agree with the substance of your remark.
It's happening both on the left left and the right. You're saying it's only the left. It's not. It's both. It's both.
And do it from the right.
And Nick,
give me an example.
Well, he was saying
about
just
give me an example.
Which one?
The hijabi.
The L'Oreal hijabi.
Oh, sorry, hijabi. Yes, I'm sorry.
You know people.
No, I'm sorry. But the fact that London Underground cravenly gave in.
And I'm so glad they did.
So 150 blokes could hold against 4,000 Zulus. Dollis Hill Tube Station couldn't even keep it up on the bloody wall. Come on.
Precisely.
Come on.
Can we just clarify? And I do actually agree with your sentiment that he was being a bit aggressive or overt in his campaigning. But let's just clarify something. Technically, a petition isn't dictating to anyone what to do. It's a piece of advice, technically.
Yes,
it's a petition. That's the meaning of the word. A petition is.
But it didn't just
petition
stop
you
at a
to listen to
petition.
me.
No, but
But that wasn't him.
But surely, if the petition is aimed at somebody, their job is to sit and say, "Is this reasonable? Is what they're saying fair and reasonable? And should we do something about it?" Now, the school in this case decided it did. I happen to disagree with them.
Yeah.
I think they should have said, "Look, we have done this for many years. This is explaining to people what the food chain is, and because one or two parents don't like it,
but it's not about meat and food chain." So, for example, I was looking at something the other day with Jermaine Greer, and she came out with an opinion on transgender people. So basically what Jermaine said is that if someone's had a transition from a man to a woman with gender reassignment, she didn't regard them as a woman. Now, that's her opinion, and she's entitled to that opinion. But in today's day and age, you seem not entitled to that opinion.
Well,
you get attacked.
Jermaine Greer is one thing we know for sure with Jermaine Greer is she's no shrinking violet, so she definitely can stand up for herself, and she's kept to that opinion. Anyway, you're watching The Pledge on Sky News. Coming up, I'm taking on the super rich. No, not you, Nick. The gap between the haves and the have-nots on our planet has gone from the ridiculous to the reprehensible. An Oxfam report this week concluded that the poorest 3.7 billion people in the world own as much wealth as the richest 42. Yeah, that's right, 42. This should be the biggest concern for the great and the good as they gather at the World Economic Forum in Davos. Some say the super rich live on another planet, but this may literally become a necessity as public services cease to function. This inequality has become morally and economically unsustainable. And yes, at the risk of sounding like a Corbynite, we really can't afford to continue being intensely relaxed about the world where the gap between rich and poor has become so extreme. This is indeed a global issue, and we need an international solution, something similar to the Paris Climate Agreement. If we continue to fail to act on income inequality, then the reactions will be much more direct than a few unexpected results at the ballot box.
Well, so it's worth looking at who some of these people are, these very wealthy people, because it's people that some of us may know. So at the top of the list, it's Jeff Bezos, who does Amazon. We've got Bill Gates, Microsoft. We've got Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook. We've got the guys behind Google, etc. So these, for me, are entrepreneurs that I admire and respect greatly. These are people who have had visions, have worked hard, have sacrificed, and created businesses that have changed the worlds of billions of people. They have given access to people to be educated, to set up their own businesses, to create their own levels of wealth. The taxation that their businesses have paid, and certainly should be paying, is enormous. And actually, I have nothing but admiration for these people, because what they have done is changed our society in fantastic, immeasurable ways. And it's also worth saying as well that these guys give billions and billions of pounds to philanthropic causes. And actually, what I think this report is doing, it's building on some anti-capitalist narrative, and what it's trying to do, it's trying to create politics of envy and trying to create a dislike of capitalism amongst people. And I think what we should be doing is celebrating people who create wealth, making sure that they pay the right taxes, and stop knocking them.
Well, I mean,
yeah, I'll let you go then.
I mean, some of them do give very large sums of money to.
Some of them don't.
Some of them give nothing. Yeah. But I mean, Zuckerberg gives 1.6 billion a year. Has given 1.6 billion. Bill Gates and runs the Gates Foundation, which is an incredible charity that helps across the world. It certainly helps in Africa.
Not very much.
He's given 60 million. Warren Buffett given 46 billion. 46 billion.
106 billion.
But what you said at the beginning is this is a problem, and that.
It's global.
Everybody knows it's a problem.
Yeah, everybody does.
What they don't know is what do you do about it in a globalised world.
Precisely.
And I think you're sort of, the climate change comparison is the wrong one. I don't think you can just get a lot of people together and say, here, let's do about this. Now, you could do something, and there's no doubt in this country, the politicians, Mrs May and others, are concerned about this ever-growing gap. And I have no doubt that the ever-growing gap was part of the reason Trump got elected. It was part of the reason we voted for Brexit and the rest of it. It's just that the poorest in the society feel increasingly left behind.
And also...
But what I don't know, unless you're prepared to, which is where we come back to my discussion about taxation, unless you're prepared to tax the rich to a much greater extent, I'm not sure what you can do about it.
Well, the reason why I used the Paris Climate Accord as an example is because the real issue is for a lot of these high net worth individuals and obviously big corporations, they are able to keep their money in other countries. So with, let's say, Apple, for example, they have a war chest of something like $120 billion that they don't want to bring into America so that they don't pay tax on it.
But my point is, that's why Trump has reduced the taxation levels, in the hope they'll bring it back.
But but my point is, they're still able to use that money and function as a business and acquire other businesses with that money. And I think what we need is some sort of global agreement that makes it harder to do that so that these super rich pay the right level of tax, because at the end of the day, we all suffer.
So you want a global tax system?
Not a global tax system. I want some sort of agreement that makes it harder to hide money in the way that it is at the moment. That's what I
presume, Nick, you're shaking your head, but I presume you would agree that Starbucks claiming that they had, like, hardly any profit in this country, even though legal, is somewhat ethically suspect.
I'm not familiar with their tax affairs.
Right. Okay. So you don't think they made any profit?
But if they were able to exploit, hang on, if they were able to, as long as they didn't break the law, and I'm sure they didn't.
That's the problem. That's why I'm saying we need to change.
We've all decided, just briefly, to ignore Michelle's excellent point, which is the number of people these companies employ.
I was in the middle of a response.
I know, but let's just remember that these companies which I can't damn well find now. Here we go. What's this list? Here we go. Amazon, Zara, by the way. He's done well, hasn't he? See how much he charges. He charges for his bed sheets. How he's worth 76 billion. I've no idea. The number of people employed by these companies.
Stop deflecting.
Fantastic.
Can I ask
we need more.
No, I'm going to ask you that same question again, as I do regularly, and you're not going to get away with it. I didn't ask whether you think it was legal.
What's that?
I asked you whether you thought it was ethical that Starbucks claimed they made no profit at a certain given time in this country, like Amazon. They didn't, basically, because they were taking their profits and they were sending them back to Amsterdam.
No, I don't think it sounds very good.
Right, OK, that's all. Because
if that's what they
That's all June's saying. However, I do agree that the solution can't be that we raise our taxes in this country, because then they'll all go elsewhere.
Yeah.
That's why I think, if I've understood you correctly, you need a global system.
Precisely.
So there's no hiding place.
That's my point.
Well, who won't?
Well, these companies.
But
the individuals.
The individuals,
but they don't live here, most of them, anyway.
Well, London's got more billionaires than New York.
Yes, but they're not these companies.
A lot of them moved.
No, but it's a principle that applies to all of them, right? So if we raise taxes here, London currently has more billionaires than New York. They will go elsewhere, and it's good that they're here.
I'm not sure that that's the great tragedy. I mean, that's the whole argument about non-doms, because they'll stay here. I don't believe in that.
No, but my point is that's why we need some sort of global system, because this is becoming...
But you're not going to get a global system.
It's never going to happen.
There's always going to be
it's always going to be oh ye of little vision.
Why not? Because if I'm running a country, I'm going to make damn certain I don't buy into it, and everybody will come to me.
There's always going to be a Cayman Island.
Always.
Well, not everyone will go to a Cayman Island.
Well, not Cayman Islands, but there'll be one another. I mean, why did some of these countries move to Ireland? Because the taxation rate was lower.
And that's why we need to have some sort of agreement where it just makes it harder to do, because this is a global problem, Greg.
Look, it's a difficult problem. It's a difficult problem in every country. It's a difficult problem in this country, and you could conceive of ways of making sure taxation works here and those things. To try to do it internationally, I mean, we'll be discussing it in 30 years' time. Nothing will have changed.
To me, we at least need to start having the conversation.
I mean, the other thing I think in Britain...
Because you could say the same about climate change.
I do think that Britain needs the culture of philanthropy that the United States has got. I don't think people who get rich here give enough to charities.
The reason we don't is because we have a welfare system that is much more...
That's of course unless they go to rather...
No, there's an additional reason, and it's because we tax higher. So you do realise what you're asking for means lower taxes.
And hang on,
back to Michelle's tax point on...
Just as earlier,
go on.
Right, we were celebrating aspects of colonialism. We should be celebrating capitalism here.
No. I am not...
This is great enterprise, Michelle.
I am not knocking capitalism. I am not one of these extreme lefties that's totally against capitalism.
Well, it sounds a bit extreme. If you want a Paris tax accord,
what I'm in favour of is inclusive capitalism, because it's getting out of control. If you look at what Theodore Roosevelt was able to do in the 20s, when a similar thing was happening in America, and the Rockefellers and all of these guys, the Carnegies, were getting out of control with their wealth, he stepped in and actually took them on.
Well,
and as a result, stopped that country going up in flames. So we better do something similar.
There's nothing wrong with new thinking and trying to have the conversation. If, Nick, in essence, you agree that it's unethical...
Corbyn,
if you agree what's going on is unethical, I think it's great to have that conversation.
Not just unethical, Majid, dangerous.
But everyone agrees with you that companies should pay their fair amount of tax. I don't think anyone would disagree with that.
Good. And individuals.
Yep. Well, guys, on that note, individuals, it's me next, and I think it's down and out for Henry Bolton, the individual that happens to be trying to lead UKIP right now, but not necessarily for his party. Right. UKIP's ruling body has passed a vote of no confidence in its leader, Henry Bolton, who has come in for heavy criticism after it emerged that his girlfriend, Jo Marnie, sent racist text messages about Prince Harry's fiancée, Meghan Markle. But Mr Bolton is refusing to resign. Instead, he claims he wants to drain the UKIP swamp. and only the members can get rid of him. Either Henry Bolton knew of his new girlfriend's extremely racist views, or he's just a terrible judge of character. Neither option inspires confidence in him as a leader. But being their fifth crisis-stricken leader in 2 years, this also doesn't bode well for UKIP. Henry Bolton's position is no longer tenable, and UKIP is a shambles. But Brexit is still very much an open debate, and that's coming from a Remainer. But there is a democratic need for a party representing the millions who voted for a hard Brexit. This is why UKIP, or a similar reincarnation, must survive. Without a party, there is a danger that those voices turn to less palatable forms of expression.
That party's there. It's called the Conservative Party.
Exactly.
They've taken up... I mean, from the moment they said Brexit means Brexit, and you can understand why they said it, why Mrs May said it, but from the moment they said Brexit means Brexit, the Conservative Party have increasingly become the Brexit Party. Yeah. And it's either an extreme Brexit or a more moderate Brexit, but it's the Brexit Party. Yeah. And that's where most of these UKIP people will go, I suspect. I mean, as for UKIP itself, I mean, on this programme last year, I said I thought Farage was the politician of his generation. I think we think of it even more now, because there was no one else there, was there?
Well, I mean,
the great danger of political parties anyway is that they attract, let's put it politely, strange people. And the more extreme, the more strange they are. And you look at what's happened to UKIP and you just think, this is a bunch of very odd people. Farage was UKIP.
He was, yeah.
And without Farage, there is no UKIP. But for the supporters, they've got
I'm not so sure it's the Tories, and the reason I think that is it kind of misunderstands or misdiagnoses what UKIP was. I think UKIP was a single-issue pressure group that hemorrhaged votes from Labour and the Tories, and so there are a whole bunch of left-leaning UKIPers who voted UKIP because they wanted Brexit. And so without that single-issue party, I wonder where those voices are going to go. And I say that as somebody, look, I'm a Remainer, I don't believe in Brexit, but at the same time, it's the reasons why I said Nigel Farage should be given a peerage, because I do recognise that he basically filled a void in this country and provided a voice for people that felt voiceless. And it is a one-man band. I do worry about the fact that there is nobody to replace him in UKIP, but I do think the party needs to act as a vent for angry people that disagree with where this country headed.
But there was only one point to UKIP. One point to UKIP. That was to get us out of the EU.
And it's happened.
They've done
it hasn't happened yet.
No, and it might not happen.
Well, I hope it doesn't. But
it might not happen. But that's not the point.
But that's a
the point
democratic
is that
debate.
was done by Farage, and Farage then walked away. and it's arguable he should have stayed for another 2 or 3 years.
And seen the process
to see the thing through.
Yeah,
True.
if he was dedicated.
And, you know, it's interesting that now Farage is talking about a second referendum because he believes they'll be overwhelmingly on his side. I don't think that is the case, but I think UKIP is now irrelevant.
And just to add to Greg's point, in Ghana, Greg, we have another word. And the word is waya, dear, which means well done. Yeah. Well said. Yes. Just to add to Greg's point, if you look at who the Conservatives have got negotiating Brexit, they're all hard Brexiteers. So I'm sorry, we have that place taken.
I'll tell you what's going to happen.
The Conservative Party
is...
The UKIP is the Brexit party.
I predicted it before, and I think it's going to happen. I think that the deal Theresa May comes back with is going to be too soft for hard Brexiteers and too hard for Remainers like you and me.
Okay.
And I think because that's going to happen, Farage is already talking about a second referendum because he's predicting that's going to happen. And I think that when that does happen, there will be a place for a party that basically tries to go harder than the deal Theresa May's presenting to the country. And if there isn't that party that exists, where will those voices go? And I worry they'll end up in more underground, dodgy, extremist, dark places.
Well, I don't think we need to worry about that. Yeah. I am sure Nigel Farage will create that party if there's a voice.
Well, he said he won't.
Well, we'll see. Yeah. He's said many things.
No, but there will be a chunk of the Conservative Party who will run that campaign.
Yeah.
Which campaign?
Well, the campaign from the heart. It's not hard enough. We want to be harder than this.
Not if they're subjected to the whip.
Well, the whips will be irrelevant.
And then they'll be kicked out. Then they'll be kicked out. Then the whip withdrawn.
But you've only seen the events of this week.
They are another party, and that's all I'm calling.
But if you look at the events of this week and what's happened to Boris, there's no discipline in the Conservative Party at the moment.
Well, over that, I think there were...
Nobody's in control. And nobody will be in control.
Well, I think that UKIP were let down by our voting system in this country because back in 2015 they got millions of votes and they ended up with 1 seat in Parliament.
They were the third biggest party not that long ago.
Let's see how many votes they got. Let's have a look. This is their votes. So that's 3.9 million votes, with a 12.6%. And as you're saying, Michelle.
And it's representative of a broken system to me, that party ended up with 1 seat in Parliament. Yeah. That's my first point. And so many people were angry at the system because of that. Now, I do think that UKIP is finished. And if I look at the seat where I'm from, Hull West and Hessel, they came 2nd place in 2015. And in 2017, even I beat them.
Yeah.
My God, they are doomed. Well, that is it.
Yeah, now make of that what you will. But they did. They got 4% of the vote, down from a 20% in Hull. But to your bigger point and your broader point, a huge amount of people, myself included, feel politically homeless at the moment. I wasn't a UKIP voter, but I do feel that there's nobody in politics at the moment that represents me. If there was an election called today, I wouldn't know who to vote for, which is why I stood for election in the last time. And my final point, just to pick you up, you in your intro said that loads of people voted for hard Brexit. They didn't. Those people voted just for Brexit. There wasn't this notion of hard and soft, half in, half out. They just said Brexit, and that's what they voted for.
Yeah. But also, well, of course, that's the problem. I mean, when she said Brexit means Brexit, she didn't know what Brexit meant, and neither does anybody else.
So, in other words, that statement means we don't know what this means.
No, that's not a criticism. That's not a criticism. I mean, it was a fairly straightforward on the ballot paper. Do you want to stay or go? They said go.
Brexit meant leaving the European Union and its associated bodies. It wasn't difficult to understand.
Well, that's
hard and soft.
That's a hard Brexit.
But if we come back to Majid, your point, I think the clue is in the title, the UK Independence Party. These people are very independent. They are very difficult to control. And when you remember, if Neil Hamilton, who was the disgraced Conservative politician who now runs Welsh Assembly of the UKIP, if you believe him, even Nigel Farage had his own battles with his own party, NEC. Even they wanted him forced out. So these are very... It's like herding cats. These are very difficult
This suggestion of Henry Bolton staying in until the Extraordinary General Assembly either backs him or asks him to leave.
Exactly,
that was Nigel Farage's suggestion. I think Henry Bolton's rather beholden to Farage's suggestions.
Yes, of course, you famously tried to back me or sack me, didn't you? They sacked you in the end.
No, I didn't even... There was never a chance. They said, we're sacking you, what do you want?
But devil's advocate to your point, because you also said that Henry Bolton's position was untenable. Now, why, as what somebody's partner or ex-partner
said... Have you read the texts?
I think what she said is utterly disgusting. I don't advocate it in any way, shape or form, but playing devil's advocate, why does what somebody's now ex-partner think reflect on your ability to do a job.
So there's a question mark as to whether she's ex or not. There's a question mark as to whether she's ex. But having left his wife and 2 kids at Christmas for her, which is his right to do, that's not my business, and I'm happy.
His baby, let's add that.
It's his right to do. I mean, marriages fall apart all the time. I'm divorced, right?
So his ability to do his job.
So that's what I was going to attempt to get to. Well, no, you kind of know if you're with someone in an intimate relationship, what they think. And if you haven't been able to work out that somebody who was that racist wasn't that racist, then you've got some impaired judgment going on. That's my only point.
And also, Majid, what I'd be interested to know is what were her views before she started dating him? I wonder if actually her joining UKIP is what influenced this sort of thinking, because the way he's responded to it is almost in a sort of protective way, and you wonder if actually her association with him is what's fueled this sort of thinking too. I want to see her social media pre the relationship.
When I interviewed him, I channeled Mrs. Merton, and I asked him, so what attracted you to the seemingly very attractive blonde 25-year-old blonde racist? To which he replied, well, she did have 4 A-levels by the time she was 15. That was the most extraordinary. Oh, that's all right then.
Anyway,
it's true.
Moving on from one straight talker, we're now ready for our straight talker of the week. And this week, the award doesn't go for somebody who's made a funny comment or a silly muck-up, but for something a little bit more serious. Take a look at this.
Look, the smear test is hugely important. Sadly, what we see, even for those who qualify, women who qualify today to have the smear test, that too many women do not take it up. And look, I know it's not a comfortable thing to do, because I have it as others do, but it is so important for women's health.
That's the kind of honesty and humanity we want to see from our Prime Minister. Theresa May at PMQs this week talking about Labour, Julia Elliott's constituent who died from cervical cancer. She may not be the most emotional leader, but for the Prime Minister, I think you deserve the Straight Talker of the Week. What do you think to that?
I've never seen her sound more humane, frankly. That was a breath of fresh air.
Yeah.
But it is a topic, and to be fair, having seen all this, because I'd forgotten about my smear, as most gals do, and I actually went and booked it because of the conversations in the media.
Oh, wonderful.
And then I did what a lot of girls also do. I got really busy with work and I had to cancel it.
Oh, no.
So now I need to rebook it. Yeah, and this is the problem for so many girls. It's in the back of your mind, but because it's not pleasant, let's be honest. So you put it off and you put it off, and then you might get it booked, you do what I did, you get busy, and
which is
important.
Why, well done, our Prime Minister, for raising the issue. Well, that's it for this week on The Pledge. Don't forget you can find us on Facebook and on Twitter. Join in the debate then. See you next week. Bye.
Do you want to borrow my copy of Sulu?